Going to go ahead and get started. My name is Tim Cole, and I work with Waypoint Church Partners, who serves Christian churches and churches of Christ in the Mid-Atlantic region, gets to help start a couple of new churches every year in the region as well. We just started our most recent church plant in Goldsboro, North Carolina, with Kevin McNeil and his team in September, and they're doing great. We are getting ready to launch our next church plant, Journey Christian Church in Virginia Beach, Virginia, here in March, and then in the planning stages for our next two. So if you're on our webinar tonight or online on demand, thank you for partnering with us to help us do that. But one of the things that we also do, among all the things that we do at Waypoint to serve established churches, is a monthly webinar that is a ministry related topic in 55 minutes or less. And so the topics kind of rotate among a number of things for lay leaders, for key leaders in the church, to help equip you to do your area of ministry even better. And so we'll have topics for elders or for safety and security teams or for prayer teams and other areas around the church. But tonight, our topic is about mission teams, and particularly about how we can do mission trips better. And so it's a timely topic for us. And of all the topics that we do, it's the ministry related topics. We are very thankful for our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University here in North Carolina, that serves as a regional partner of ours, because we have a very similar group of churches that we serve and support and draw from. And so we're thankful for them, and they've been our sponsor since we began our webinar series more than 4.5 years ago. So we're thankful for them. I was thinking about it this week. I'm very interested in this topic myself because I've had the good fortune of being on a number of mission trips. I think I'm approaching 20 short-term mission trips of varying lengths and destinations with multiple churches, probably 6 or 7 different churches, and they all do different ways to handle their mission trips. And so I'll be very curious to hear from a so-called expert on the standards of excellence you can have in your mission trips. And so I've got a friend who's joining us, Tory Ruark, and he is with an organization called Standards of Excellence in Short-Term Missions. And we're going to get started. There he is right there, joining us from the West Coast. And so I want to let you all know, I'm going to share the screen back here, that we do have a YouTube channel with all 50 plus of our webinars, and they are organized in playlists. And so there is a playlist just for the missions topics that we've done over the last 4 years. And so there's 7 or 8 of those in that, including the one we did a year ago at this time, similar topic about doing short-term mission trips well. And so it's one of the common denominators for a lot of churches in our region and around the country, is that a lot of churches are taking mission trips in spite of all the differences in the way churches are organized. That's a similarity that we see in common. And so I've asked Tony to come on our webinar tonight and to talk to us about the 7 different standards of excellence that they've identified in their organization, and how they try and equip and empower churches to rise to these standards of doing mission trips really well. Tony, thanks again for joining us tonight. I'm really excited about our topic personally, as well as getting to help equip the churches that are in our region that will be taking mission trips. We've been on a hiatus from trips for most churches for the last year and a half. My wife went on a trip to one of our mission partners at our church late February of last year.
Yep.
And who knew late February that would be the end of the line as far as any short-term mission trips. And so we've had this pause. And this pause for most churches has created an opportunity for us to evaluate just about everything at our church. The way we do our worship programming, the way we do our discipleship pathways, all kind of things have been reevaluated. And I think tonight is a great opportunity for us to talk about, should we reevaluate where we're at on doing our short-term mission trips? How can we steward not only that week or however long it is, but the whole event from beginning to end, from planning to execution, and then the follow-up? How can we steward that well to do it really well for everybody involved? And so thanks for joining us tonight. And I'd love for you to just kind of share with us maybe very quickly, kind of your story from getting to missions and to your spot where you are with standards of excellence. But then just go ahead and dive right in, and I may interject some questions along the way myself, but go ahead and dive in and start talking about how we can take our mission trips to a whole new level.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm really excited to be here. I've been with Standards of Excellence in short-term missions since about 2004. At the time, it was under the name Delta Ministries. We were a traditional kind of short-term mission sending agency that worked primarily alongside churches, helping them send mission teams primarily to visit their supported missionaries. And in 2016, we merged with SOE. We had a lot of mutual staff or some of our staff on the board, and just kind of made sense to merge together. SOE inherited the staff from Delta, and those of us from Delta inherited the vision and mission and calling of SOE. So my first mission trip was a 4-day long weekend over Thanksgiving to Ensenada, Mexico, when I was a freshman in college. And really had no good reason to sign up other than it was less expensive than going home. It was an adventure I never had before, and I thought maybe I could get some good tacos. And, we're going to talk about the standards of excellence, and we're going to talk about best practices. And the disclaimer I always give is we never want to plan or legislate out the Holy Spirit, one. God has an amazing way of using us, even in our imperfections and in the crazy things we do. And second, we never want, as we talk about this, for anybody to feel like anything they've ever done has been invalidated. God doesn't ask for the best; He asks for our best. And the ministries you've been involved in, if you, as we go through some of the things, if you say, that's kind of hitting close to home, don't feel bad. God asks for our best, not the best. And but after today, you'll have hopefully a new best to give, because like you said, Tim, the pause we've had has allowed us to consider how we restart our mission trips. And we exist to help people make their mission trips better, because we believe that mission trips should honor God, they should honor your host, and they should honor the people you're serving. But it hasn't, I don't think it's necessarily always been that way. And I'm assuming here you can all see my screen, my slideshow. So, sometimes I tell people, imagine a world without like AAA or hotels.com or Expedia. Imagine if there's nobody out there who said, this is what a 2-star hotel is, this is what a 3-star hotel, this is what a 4-star, and somehow monitor that. What if every hotel was allowed to give their own star rating? Well, it would be chaos, right? Because how would you know what was actually a 2-star hotel? When you go to book that 4-star hotel, how do you really know that this is safe to take my children to? Or how do you really know that I'm going to get what's promised if there's no standard and there's nobody setting it? Well, in some ways, that's the way short-term missions was, and still is in many places. Because for a long time, we didn't know what made a good short-term mission trip. Let me just read this quick story. This is a story of a church. It's from a book called Giving Wisely. This well-meaning, generous church from the United States headed to Mexico to help our brothers in the South. They did what many churches do. They built a building for the small body of believers. After all, a church needs a building, right? So the Americans worked hard. The Mexican church worked hard. They poured sweat and even some blood in the place. After some time of hard work, the building was done. Everybody was happy. Well, at least the Americans. The Mexican brothers and sisters smiled and shook hands, and they politely thanked them for coming and helping them. They bid their farewells. They hugged. They said goodbye and adios, and said them all over again and again and again. If you've been to Mexico, that makes sense to you. Well, the Americans hopped in their van and headed back to the United States, where no doubt they showed their slideshows and encouraged others to step out for the Lord, and their lives truly would never be the same again. Little did these Americans know, as soon as they left, the smiles on the faces of their Mexican sister church disappeared as they walked over to the new building and began to take it apart. Reusing the materials, they rebuilt the building the way they wanted it, in the place they wanted it. And when we don't have a standard, when we don't have a way of saying, what does a trip look like that honors God, honors our host, and honors the people we're serving, then we end up with a lot of stories like this one. And a lot of people read this, and maybe even the first few times I read this story, I was kind of critical of that church and thought, man, you know, how could they just come down there and do this thing that the Mexican church didn't really even want? But then I realized, man, it's way more complicated than that. I mean, look in the story that the Mexican church, they're polite, they're happy, they're shaking hands, they're hugging. And then I realized that the problem is that we have bad people doing bad things. The hard part is we have a lot of people with the right heart, but we go about it the wrong way. But even on top of that, they don't even know that they're going about it the wrong way. People don't even know what they don't know. That's the definition of like a blind spot, right? You don't even know that you have a blind spot. And I look at this and I think, how could they have even known? There was nothing that clued them in, nothing about the interaction with the church, with the Mexican church that clued them in, I'm guessing, you know. So in the late 90s, mission leaders came together and they started sharing stories. And through these stories, they started realizing their blind spots. They started realizing that there really was no standard. There was no way of evaluating a trip and saying whether or not this honored God, honored their host, and honored the people they were serving. The only way we had to evaluate a trip was what people said when they came back from their trip. And of course, all of them said, oh, it was a great experience. Oh, I'll never be the same. But candidly, we all know a lot of them do seem the same, you know? So these mission leaders, they're sharing their stories and thinking about, man, how do we do this? What do we do? How do we set some standards? How do we evaluate whether the short-term mission trip is a good one, whether the short-term mission program is a good one, so that people deciding, how do you decide whether or not you want to send your teenager? You know, how do you decide whether or not you should go if we don't have some standards, if we don't understand what we're going for? Well, the hard part is that we're really used to evaluating things from an end product standpoint. What did it yield? What was the harvest? But you guys are all in ministry. You realize that in the kingdom of God, it's really difficult. If you wanted to, if you could only evaluate a short-term mission trip based on the fruit that came from it, that would be really hard, because so much of that doesn't come until later on. You know, the Apostle Paul says that some plant, others water, but ultimately it's God is the God of the harvest. And so, you know, the mission leaders that eventually launched the Standards of Excellence, SOE, realized that the old way of thinking of evaluating, kind of like maybe what a teacher would do, they would take the work that a student, you know, put in and evaluate it and give a grade. That wasn't going to work. We couldn't just look back after a trip and say, did this happen, or did that happen, or did this or this? And, you know, did we get every person home who got on the airplane? You know, that wasn't going to work as a way of evaluating. Somewhere along the way, whether it was through God's inspiration or wisdom of years and years of ministry, these mission leaders were surveying the missionaries and national pastors who were hosting teams, and surveying missionaries, short-term missionaries, and they're studying the Bible, and they're working with groups in Canada and the UK who are doing something similar. And they realize what we really need is a process. What we really need is some steps to take, a process-driven standard, not a standard that's a report card at the end. Did you check these boxes? But a standard. So we go about the process. You know, when I think about the Christian faith, you know, the end product's important. You know, Jesus accomplished something in his death and resurrection, and we eventually end up in a place with Jesus. But boy, God really cares about the process, doesn't he? And so those early leaders realized we got to come up with a set of standards or elements that can be used as a roadmap. You know, Tim said earlier that, you know, a lot of churches do things differently. And even in mission trips, we see them done differently. And that's okay. And actually, what you're going to see as we unpack these elements as much as we can in a very short time, is that these are more like a roadmap. This is not a 12 steps to a better mission trip. This is a roadmap. These are elements. Figure out, how do these elements apply to your ministry context? What does it look like for us with our unique DNA? So this is a process-oriented thing. It's 7 elements that we believe you should have part of every mission trip you go on. So as you think about relaunching mission trips, as you review or you think, what could we do better? What would we change? Run your mission trips perhaps through this filter, these 7 standards. And so I'm going to reveal them briefly, and then we'll kind of unpack them a little bit, and then I'll let you know about how you can unpack them further. So the first 2 standards are God-centeredness and empowering partnerships. These are kind of separated off because they're a little bit more overarching. They're kind of philosophical. Like, how would you write down on a piece of paper and show somebody I'm God-centered? You know, how would you show somebody on a piece of paper, I have an empowered partnership? But these are huge. These are foundational, you know, God-centeredness and empowered partnerships. And then the next 5 are really chronological and have to do with the mission process. So as you're reviewing, think about, why am I doing that trip? We're going to get into this. And who am I doing it with? And then you're going to think about mutual design, comprehensive administration, qualified leadership, appropriate training, and thorough follow through. There it is. If those 7 elements are a part of your mission trip, we believe you can be confident that you're putting together a mission trip that's going to honor God, honor your host, and honor the people you're serving. Okay, so that's
let me
one.
interrupt you.
Yeah.
The natural question that may come up here, but if not, I know people are thinking it is, rather than writing all this down, we're going to be able to have access to communicating with you as standards of excellence and getting further into this as we get excited about fleshing out our first set of trips that we're going to take post-COVID. So let us know what kind of access we're going to have to what you're presenting tonight. So
yeah,
we don't.
So I would be happy, Tim, I'll send you all these slides in PDF that you can hand out, you know, to people. And then I'm also putting in, I'm not sure if this is going to go into the chat box here. Maybe I'll hit everyone. This is a link to our website where you can download a 1-page summary of these 7 standards, or you can download like a 50-page PDF booklet. You take your choice, but you can go and learn more about the standards there just by going and reading. So yeah, it's a good call, Tim. You don't need to be
have
scribbling all this
access to
stuff down.
the chat box. Go ahead and copy, click on that, copy that link. And we're very happy to promote organizations like Standards of Excellence and the work they do to serve churches and leaders. And so we want you to go to their website, contact them, and use them as best you can to make your church trips the best they can be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's one grid. We're going to, you're going to think through your trips. The other grid, and we're not going to spend as much time on this, but it's important for you to see, is we tend to think a lot about the people going on the trip, and we tend to think a lot about the people we're serving. But there's a lot of other people involved, and there's a lot to it. And Tim even kind of talked about at the very beginning, we want to think not just about that 1 week or 2 weeks or however long that group travels, but look at the process as a whole. So there's a book called Maximum Impact Short-Term Mission, and I've got it footnoted, but I just realized the font is still in black, so it's hard to read it down there, but it's from a book called Maximum Impact Short-Term Mission. It's pretty technical. So, the book is pretty technical. It's a kind of a dry read, but this idea comes from that you have 2 trilogies, a participant trilogy. So that's the senders. That's either, people praying, giving, watching your dog, taking care of your kids while you're gone. The entity that's sending you, the organization or church or school. You've got the people going, a leader and a team member. And then you've got the host receivers. And that's a field facilitator would be like that missionary or national pastor who hosts you, who's your liaison. And then the intended receptors are the people you're wishing to serve. And then, of course, you've got the process trilogy, which there is a time where you're preparing. There's a time where you're serving on your trip. And then there's a post time. And what we want to do is help people expand their vision instead of focusing in on maybe the middle of that tic-tac-toe board, the people going while they're on the trip. We want to back it out and see how God is using everybody in his great commission. So let's take this event, which, if you're reading it, you might think this maybe sounds like something my church has done. I know I kind of look back and go, oh, that's kind of something that I think I've been involved with. So number one, God-centeredness, that's standard number one. It's not any more important than the others, but it is very foundational. And it essentially talks about our purpose and our lives and our methods being God-centered. And we're not going to break the whole thing down today. But if you think about God-centeredness and you think about the story you just read, which is true, by the way, names and countries have been changed to protect the guilty, but
Mhm.
who or what was at the center of this trip, and what makes you come to that conclusion? So you can feel free to enter your thoughts into the chat box there. Who or what was at the center of this trip, and what makes you think that way? Uh, as I think about often, even at my own church with my own youth intern, who or what is at the center of the trip, and often it's not God-centered. Often we end up planning a trip because the youth pastor told me I needed to as part of my internship, or because the senior pastor told me I should, or because the church down the road's doing it and the kids or the adults, or it's really revitalized things, or maybe even something like your supported missionary asked you if you could send a team. And then you start thinking about, well, I have a buddy who is here, or I knew somebody from seminary who is a missionary there. And I often find that, or like in this case, um, as consumers, summer camp didn't do it for them what they wanted to do, so they're going to give a mission trip a try, right? It's in there, in the third paragraph. Express the church disappointment in the camps this year, right? Kind of consumer mentality. And well, maybe world missions will help us accomplish what we want to get out of it. Wow. Gosh, I can't tell you how many times I say, let's go back to the beginning and let's ask God what he might have for us. So God-centeredness at the heart of it, at the very heart of it. Step one, God-centeredness, is that we should come before God seeking his will and ask him, where would you have us to serve? Do you want us to serve? Before you start up your mission trips again after COVID, ask God this and ask him where he might be leading you to go. God-centeredness. There's a lot more to it, but this is the heart of it. Number two is empowered partnerships. And so an excellent short-term mission is born out of an empowered partnership. It's hopefully, if you're sending short-term teams, it's with a really close partner. You're not just sending people here or there because there's a good opportunity. And so what does that look like? What does an empowered partner look like? Empowered partnership looks like? Well, it looks like our primary focus together with me and the partner. So we're primarily focused on those people we want to serve together. But that plans benefit both of us. Look, if your short-term mission trips only go and benefit your host, that's probably more like a sponsorship than a partnership. Conversely, if you're like in this story, really it's all about what the goers are going to get out of it. Well, that's not really a partnership. This story is not one of partnership, except for you could probably say something for the fact that the missionary felt like he could write this really direct letter. And of course, there's mutual trust and accountability. So let me give you a question to think about here. And that's this: what took away the host missionary's power in this partnership? What took away the host missionary's power? We want both partners to have power, and perhaps even that host receiving partner should really feel empowered.
I can interject and just say, from
Yeah.
my experience in a lot of mission trips on multiple fields, and having been a missionary myself that received trips, I think most missionaries, we don't appreciate the fact that they don't feel like they're in a position to say no very
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
And so they get taken advantage of unwittingly by their American partners. We
Yeah.
think we're in a partnership with them, but we just tell them what we want to do. And most of them are not going to say, you know what, that's not the best for us.
Yeah.
And so so we don't appreciate the fact that they're not going to say no.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're 100% right there, Tim. So, well, look, there's a few things here, and we'll unpack these a little bit so that you can know what you maybe don't know, you know? So some threats to empowering, and Tim got the first one. It's an imbalance of resources. You see it in the letter, right? I know I'm putting stuff at risk here. I mean, you support my family's ability to be here. It's an imbalance of resources, takes power away from your partner often, because you probably, as a sending church, have more resources, financial particular, than your host. That's a natural, it just happens. Okay. An expert savior mentality sometimes takes power away. Um, so sometimes we come at it as if we're the expert or the savior, as much as we try not to. But you know what? Sometimes it's also not just us, but often because of the cross-cultural dynamic and some of the developing countries that your partners are from, they sometimes even they carry a sense into the partnership of you're an American, you know, you come and teach our Bible classes. Uh, okay, I mean, maybe there really is nobody trained there to do that, but just because I'm white and I'm from America doesn't mean that I'm the expert on the Bible. But sometimes our partners will carry that into it. We just need to be aware of it. Direct versus indirect communication. I kind of wonder if this was an issue. You know, in the story, um, it, the missionary says, I expressed that the timing wasn't good and that the church leaders here thought 6 months from now might be better. Couldn't you see this being a very indirect, warm culture kind of way of communicating? Well, it's probably not the best. It probably would be better in 6 months. And then somebody from our very direct communication culture just reads that as, well, it would be better, but it's still okay now. And, you know, we really can't do it then, but we can do it now. So why don't we do it now? That's actually better, right? If we do it now. But of course, we're just doing this with communication, right? Our partner who communicates more indirectly is giving us a message, and we miss it because we're communicating direct, you know? So just, you got to be aware of that direct versus indirect communication. High cultural, high value on hospitality and serving others. We sometimes just have to have that cultural awareness that sometimes just by asking the question, we're putting them in a position to not be able to say no. So sometimes we have to be discerning about the situation, and is this really the right time to ask about something? Because there, like I said, there are some cultures that hospitality is such a high value, and serving and pleasing others is such a high value. Unless you really have that mutual trust built up, it's you're going to be putting them in a tough spot. So, some things, some threats to those empowering partnerships. Now, what can you do to build those partnerships? I'm not sure we have a lot of time to get into those, but it's going to take time. It's going to take relationship. It's going to take communication beyond just the idea of, can I send a short-term team, right? You've got to be actually partnered for the accomplishment of their ministry goals beyond just sending a short-term team. Okay. All right. So that's just a little bit about empowering partnerships. Mutual design. So this is the idea that we work together to design what this mission trip is going to look like. You know, and when we do that, what we're doing there actually does align with the long-term strategies of the partnership. We're not just going and building, painting the church building because we want to provide an experience, and I don't know what else we do, but you know, for $75 we can get 25 gallons of paint and they could paint the church building again. You know, making sure that we can really implement our part of the plan. So let me just ask you this question for consideration. And if you're on demand, you can even pause it and consider this. But where do you see the idea of mutual design in the letter? Of course, I'm setting you up for the fact that there is some mutual design somewhere in the letter.
Mhm.
So where do you see this idea of mutual design in the letter? All right, maybe it's a little bit of a trick question because I don't think it's anywhere in that first trip. But if you look at the last large paragraph before the end of the letter, it says, it starts with, do we want another team? And he says, yes. In fact, next spring, there's a holiday weekend when children in our barrios roam the streets. Is there a group who would be willing to come and assist the body here to hold a weekend block festival? FCC's group would not be in charge. They may not have grand reports, but they could see God use them as they serve. We would want them to come here for 2 days of orientation prior to the festival. If you think there are some behind the scenes people who could serve next spring, let me know. So I think there we see some mutual design, right? We see something that could really help that church accomplish their long-term goals, their vision of ministering to their community. And they say, what would it take for you to meet your part of this? Well, it's people who want to serve in the background, who don't need to be in charge. They don't need grand reports, and what would that host need to do to provide their part? Well, they got to come up with how to train you to help them. And they've got to put on this ministry. You can't come in and do it for them. You just don't have that ability. You're from thousands of miles away. You can't bring what they need in 2 suitcases each, So they've got to put that in place. Okay. They've got to be able to prepare for it. They've got to be able to execute, and they've got to follow up with the people who participate. That's all stuff you can't do. So there is some mutual design in this. That's what that might look like. So I want to tell you some things that mutual design doesn't look like, because I think these are common misconceptions. Sometimes we think we suggest ideas and they pick. And this is how I've had many conversations go. Hey, Pastor Alejandro, we'd love to come and serve you guys. I know you have a great vision for reaching your community. How can we come and serve with you guys? Coming with that very much what we've talked about. How can we come and serve with you guys? Oh man, Tory, that's such a blessing. Whatever you guys would want. I mean, what would the group be really passionate about or really good at? Like, oh yeah, that's a good question. And then you start thinking, well, I've got some young people who really love working with kids, and I've also got I've got a doctor and some nurses who they could. So we start suggesting some ideas, and they pick. Now, remember we talked about empowered partnerships, meeting the long-term goals. And one of those things, we just, the imbalance of resources and the direct communication, what ends up happening is we end up stealing that power back unintentionally. One of the ways we steal that power back is you're kind of setting the terms of what you're going to do when you start saying, here are some ideas and you pick, or here are some dates and you pick. We kind of steal some of that power back by setting the terms of our involvement, or setting the limits. And here's how we can be involved. So it's hard, but you're going to have to learn, wow, man, I think we could probably put together a team to do whatever you think might really serve. What, man, if you could dream, what would you want to be able to do together to serve your community? It might take some back and forth. Same thing with dates. Well, we could probably bring a group whenever would be best for you. When is really the best time to do this? We ended up doing these trips to Italy in September, and people complained to us about, why would you do it in September? We're all in school, and well, we can't do it in August because everybody in Italy is on vacation. What's the point of showing up to do something when nobody's there? That doesn't make any sense, right? So we've got to be wise there. But it also doesn't mean we have no voice as a sender. So you still have to give some feedback. If they give an idea and you really can't meet your part of the plan, you got to say, I don't think that's going to work for us. Because if you try to just send somebody over there, that's not going to work. Okay. So it doesn't mean you each do half the work or each pay half the bills. And it also doesn't mean things stay the same. Early on in a partnership, you might be bringing a lot more financial resource to it. And over time, that starts to flip. It might be that you bring a lot more of the planning because your church has some expertise in how to carry out some of these events. And by nature, we might be more strategic in that planning. But then over time, you might see that element flip. But so there's just a thought about mutual design. How do you together decide what is this trip gonna look like? Okay. So we're whipping through these really quick. We have a 10-hour workshop where we normally go through this, but so we're whipping through these kind of quick.
And I want to ask you about that at the end is
Yeah.
where do people go from here as far as connecting with you, getting
Yeah,
training?
totally. We've got,
kind of
yeah,
thing.
I've got some options for you.
So we'll zip through this.
Yeah, we'll get them up there. So comprehensive administration, some of you are thinking, I hire somebody to do my administration for me. Some of you are like, I love administration. This is what I live for, spreadsheets and checklists and making sure everything is taken care of. Hey, standard 4 comprehensive administration is not any more or less important than any other standard. So I try to put it this way. Administration really is, oops, I thought I'd hit this slide, but that's okay. Comprehensive administration to me really is about stewarding your people. If you don't have your ducks in a row, if you don't have insurance for people when they travel, if you don't have their medical history, if you don't have their copy of their passport, if you don't have the visa figured out, if you don't have the right liability forms figured out, hey, you're not stewarding your people well. You're putting them in danger. Now, if all you ever do is make sure you have all your paperwork right and you haven't done any of these other standards, you're also not stewarding your people well. Mm-hmm. But comprehensive administration, this is really what it comes down to. It's about stewarding your people. And we can go into more of what that takes. But one of the keys here is finding ways to work smarter, not harder, to cover your bases, so you have time to address the other standards. And that's through policies and procedures and online tools or processes that expedite things and make things efficient. So that's comprehensive administration to me is really about stewarding your people.
All right. I'm going to interrupt as you go to the next one.
Yeah.
Just to remind people, there's a Q&A button. And if there's a question that you came into this webinar tonight thinking, I hope this gets answered, go ahead and hit the Q&A button and ask that. And we might be able to answer that either at the end or after the fact via email.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So number 5 is qualified leadership. This is huge. The group needs a good leader. And if you're like a lot of the groups that churches and organizations we talk to, you just don't have enough of these. You just don't have, you think we want to do more, but I don't know who would lead the teams, or I'm starting to get burned out because I have to lead every single team. And I'm convinced that part of the problem that we have in recruiting leaders is we don't know how to identify potential leaders, and we don't know how to explain to them what they're signing up for. And so they either say no because they think it's too big of a job, or they say yes because they're not really understanding what it is, and then it doesn't work out real well and you don't retain them. So I think I forgot to hide a slide here, so we're going to just skip through these. This is one of the best things I could tell you. If you're going to think about a leader, think about recruiting and training leaders, first of all, make a job description for a team leader and use that standard as your guide. Characteristics, the character of a leader, start there. That widens your pool, right? Because not everybody has been to a foreign country, but you might have people of high character. What skills do they need, and what values and experiences, and make a job description. What characteristics do they need? What skills do they need? What are they responsible for doing? Now you can start to identify potential leaders, and it's a real gift to them. You can say, look, this is what we're asking you to sign up for. Maybe they don't have to hound everybody and make sure they get all their money in because somebody from the church is going to do that. Okay. And they go, oh, well, maybe that's not that bad. So make that job description. What does it look like to be a leader? Okay. So I'm watching the time here. Am I good? Do I have about 3 more minutes, Tim, or do we need to? Okay.
No, yep, you're good.
Okay. Training is huge. How you prepare your teams who are going. It's more than a packing list. And I'm going to say it's more than a manual. You give people 80 pages to read and you expect them to read it. That's not really training. Okay. Ask yourself, what do people need to know, be able to do, and be like to be effective missionaries? Do they need to know how to share their testimony? Okay. Do they need to be able to greet people in a foreign language? Do they need to be humble? Do they need to be servants? Okay. How are we going to build that into them before they even go? Okay. So here are some basic, if you had to lump it into categories, I would encourage you to consider, how do I prepare people by addressing character, their character, helping them know how to behave. Okay. Because our behavior flows out of our character. Community, meaning the relationships and unity on the team, preparing them for the culture and any specialized ministry that, anything they need to know to carry out that ministry task. Okay. A really good philosophy of training. We want you to fail here so you can succeed there, not succeed here and fail there. So we make training tough. We do things intentionally to allow people to the opportunity to apply what they're learning. So let's see, I was thinking there was something else in there. No, but that's the idea there. Give them a chance to apply what they're learning. If you've talked about you need to be a servant, go do something that makes them be a servant before they leave. Okay. If you're going to say, guys, you're going to have to eat out of a common bowl, you're all going to have to just dig in and eat. I mean, probably not as common now in COVID times, but let's say that was a common one before. Practice eating a common bowl meal before you leave so that so that they know how to do it. They're comfortable. They don't make a funny face and offend their host. Okay. Give them opportunities to apply what they're learning by being intentional about your training. Let them fail here. It's safe to fail here. It's going to be more damaging to the partnership if they fail there. And then standard 7 is follow through, this idea of what happens after the trip. And we talk about debriefing and follow through. And let me just give you something really fast. To me, debriefing is reflecting on your trip. It could be at the end of the day, reflecting on it, could be at the end of the trip, or both. And the idea is, before we can figure out what God is inviting us into, we have to figure out what has just happened. These experiences are really wild. Okay. So we need to have space for debriefing. We need to help people after the trip decide, what is God asking me to do now? How do I discern God's will and say yes to his invitation for my life? Look, maybe 1 out of 10 who go on your trips are going to become an overseas missionary, but it doesn't mean God doesn't have an invitation for them to join in the Great Commission or join in ministry in their community. Okay. So I'm going to forward through a bunch of these because I want to make sure I tell you. So if you're like, wow, this is really cool, we'd love to understand this more and kind of make sure we have these things in our mission trip. You could do the 10-hour version of this. It's called the Standards Introductory Workshop. We discover the standards. You're going to do it with other mission leaders, and you can do this either in person as one before a conference or online. And if you visit soe.org and click on conferences and workshops, you can see the options that are out there to do that. Okay. And in fact, I can probably put that link in really quick if my internet will go that fast. Here we go. So it's $150 a person to attend a Standards Introductory Workshop. If you're an SOE member, which I'll talk about in a second, you can attend for $112 online. Okay. So there's a link to where you can see how you can join one of those workshops. And then another good step would be to become a member of SOE. It's $150 annually, and you get access to resources. You get access to the community of networking with like-minded individuals. And again, the idea is membership should be a pathway to get from where you are to where you want to be. Okay. And you can learn more about membership at SOE's website. You can even apply for it at the website. Okay.
Tory, how often are the conferences like the 10-hour one that you described? How often per year are they provided or offered?
Yeah, we do. They're almost every month. I don't think we do one in January or July. but I believe, and then here's a link to that membership page. But I believe we're doing them every month, with the exception of January and July. People are recovering from the holidays in January, and they're out on trips, ideally in July. But yeah, and we do have several that are going to be in person throughout the year. ICOM is actually one of them that we do it in person, and that's actually the least expensive one because ICOM helps supplement the cost. So that's only $50. If you're attending ICOM anyway, come a day early and participate. Yeah.
And so next year, ICOM will be in Columbus. I'll give a plug
Yeah.
to ICOM. They were just here in Richmond last month, but Columbus next year,
Yeah.
and then Oklahoma City the year after. But yeah, that's a great opportunity to bundle it. You get to go to ICOM and the pre-conference event all at the same time. One flight for two conferences. That's pretty good.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. This was a lot in a little bit of time, but it really gives people just a glimpse of where they can go. I think that's the first part of this is just like you said, we don't know what we don't know, but now this kind of lets us know, oh, that's what I don't know. And so I can go somewhere to help find out, how do I train my people before they go?
Exactly.
Or how do I create good administration of a trip so we don't have major gaps in what we're doing. And so your website is the first place to go, soe.org, and to be able to provide resources for that. So thanks for your time. I'm going to share my screen here and just remind people of a couple of things about Waypoint. We're glad that everybody has joined us online tonight, and there's some resources I want to tell you about that are relatively new to Waypoint. One is we just kicked this off in September, is a podcast, regular podcast twice a month for pastors' wives. And then we've also got another leadership podcast that's been going since January, twice a year. So we're up to episode number twice a month. So 22 episodes, 23. They drop every Tuesday. And so our next webinar is coming up in January, and we do this every year as we're getting restarted for the year to make sure we are centered as Christian leaders, particularly staff, but any Christian leaders, to make sure you're taking care of your soul, so you've got gas in your tank to help you get you where you need to go in ministry this year. Our biggest event coming up for Waypoint, the biggest event for the year, is coming up in March, as is typical, called The Art of the Sermon. And we've got some great presenters this year, depending on which part of the region you're in. We're going to have Mark Moore, very well-known Bible teacher. That's going to be at 3 of our 5 events. Bob Russell's going to be in South Carolina, and then Brett Andrews, our own Brett Andrews at New Life Christian Church, will be in West Virginia. And so you can see more information about that on the events tab of our website, Waypoint Church Partners. And so, as always, we're so thankful for Mid-Atlantic Christian University, that's been our sponsor. And we hope to see you on future webinars. But not only that, that you would invite the leaders at your church. You'll get emails about upcoming events like these, that you'd invite the leaders at your church to attend those webinars and other podcasts that are specific to the area of ministry where they serve, so that they can be at their best serving Christ and his bride. So thanks for being with us tonight. We hope to see you next month at our webinar, and that you'd go to the podcast link on our website, the tab at the top, to subscribe to either of our podcasts, or you can subscribe on our YouTube channel to our monthly webinar like this one, so that every month you get notified when the next one has been loaded to the Waypoint Church Partners YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us tonight. We hope to see you again soon. We're so thankful for Tory and his time tonight, really just exposing us to the ways that we can start to even conceive of being really great at the mission trip, stewarding our people to serve God, to honor our hosts and the people we're serving there. Have a great night. Thanks.